Intro dramatic hook mystery. Assumptions challenged VODark.com. Serious tone. What if I told you that the world's first and largest economic disaster didn't begin with a stock market, a bank collapse, or even a war? What if the roots of the greatest financial breakdown in human history began with something far more ordinary? Something so familiar, so simple, that we don't even notice it anymore. A piece of paper. Because in this story, paper wasn't just paper. It was power, illusion, and eventually, destruction. Most people think the worst economic crisis the world ever faced was the Great Depression, or maybe the 2008 meltdown. But history hides a far older catastrophe, one so extreme that prices doubled every single day, and money became so worthless that people burned banknotes for heat because firewood was more expensive. This was the world's first massive economic disaster, the hyperinflation crisis of the Weimar Republic, and the chain of events that began far earlier than most people realize. Today, we're going to uncover the mystery behind how a sophisticated society modern for its time collapsed under its own currency, and why echoes of this story still haunt our global financial system today. Sechateaga, stage background, history, key figures, with thesis, VO steady build-up. To understand how an economic disaster of this scale could happen, we need to go back before the famous wheelbarrows of cash, back before the German Empire fell, back even before World War I. We need to start with one idea, a revolutionary idea that changed the world. Money doesn't need gold, it just needs trust. This was the seed. But like many seeds planted in history, it grew into something far more dangerous. Our key figures in this story are not charismatic politicians or war heroes. They are men hidden behind ledgers and printing presses. German Chancellor Theobald von Bochma, Finance Minister Rudolf Havenstein, industrial magnates, and bankers, the Allied powers, demanding reparations. Each of them made choices, some desperate, some strategic, some reckless, that would push a nation into economic oblivion. And yet, the most terrifying part of this story is that the early signs of collapse didn't look like destruction at all. They looked like prosperity.
Our story officially begins in 1914. World War I erupts, and Germany faces a problem. Wars are expensive, far more expensive than anyone predicted. While other nations raise taxes to pay for the conflict, Germany chose a different path, one that would shape the fate of its currency for decades. They decided to borrow money instead of taxing citizens. But loans require collateral, and Germany made a bold assumption, greater than we will win the war, and make the losers pay. This assumption became the financial foundation of the entire conflict. So the government printed treasury notes, banks expanded credit, the money supply ballooned. Prices rose quietly, almost politely, nothing alarming yet. But beneath the calm surface, something irreversible had begun.
As the war dragged on, Germany printed more and more money. With gold no longer back in the currency, the limit was only the speed of the printing machines. Factories were running, soldiers were armed, citizens were assured, our economy is strong. This was the illusion, because when a government creates money faster than an economy produces goods, the value of each unit quietly slips downward. But this early slide was hidden beneath wartime shortages, rationing, and national pride. People didn't blame the currency. They blamed the war. Then November 1918 arrived. Germany lost. The assumption that the losers will pay collapsed overnight. Now Germany had to pay, and the price was enormous. Under the Treaty of Versailles, Germany owed reparations equivalent to hundreds of billions in today's dollars. And they owed it in foreign currency, not their own. So how do you pay a debt in a currency you don't have? You print more of your own money, sell it, and hope for the best. Between 1919 and 1922, inflation was rising but manageable. Prices doubled occasionally. Wages struggled to keep up. But something else was happening, something few people recognized. Foreign investors began losing confidence in the German mark. Confidence, that invisible force that keeps money alive. By late 1922, Germany was printing money to pay for everything. Government salaries, war pensions, social programs, Industrial subsidies, reparations. The printing presses ran day and night. New bills were issued in absurdly high amounts. Then came the spark that turned inflation into hyperinflation. Germany defaulted on its reparation payments. In response, France and Belgium invaded the Rue Germanis industrial heart. German workers went on strike in protest. Factories shut down, and the government, trying to support striking workers, printed even more money. It was the perfect storm: a shrinking economy, exploding money supply, collapsing trust. By 1923, prices were doubling every 3.7 days. A loaf of bread that cost 160 marks in 1922 now costs 200 billion marks. Children made kites out of banknotes. Workers demanded to be paid twice a day because morning wages became worthless by evening. Money wasn't money anymore. It was paper. With hyperinflation came chaos. Savings evaporated. Middle-class families were destroyed. Pensions became worthless. Food riots spread across cities. Crime surged. People traded furniture for potatoes. Farmers refused to accept cash. Shopkeepers changed prices every hour. This wasn't just an economic collapse. It was a psychological one. When money fails, trust fails, and society fractures. Many historians credit this period with fueling extremism, radical ideologies, and eventually the political movements that would change the course of world history. It wasn't just a financial disaster, it was a human one. Germany attempted several solutions: printing emergency money, pegging currency to gold, issuing trillion-mark notes, negotiating new reparation schedules, but nothing worked. You cannot rebuild trust with ink and paper. Finally, in late 1923, Germany introduced a new currency, the Rentenmark. It was backed not by gold, but by real assets: land, buildings, and industrial output. Overnight, the hyperinflation stopped, but the damage was already done. Millions had lost everything, and a wounded nation, humiliated and desperate, became vulnerable to extremism and aftershock that would erupt violently a decade later. Modern parallels, repeating patterns, and shocking data. VO. Serious, the most unsettling part of this story is not that it happened, but that its patterns appear again and again. Zimbabwe, 2008, Yugoslavia, 1994, Venezuela 2016, Lebanon, 2020, Argentina. Multiple times the triggers are eerily similar. 1. Excessive money printing. 2. Large government debt. 3. Declining faith in institutions. 4. External sanctions. Global crises. 5. A slow erosion of trust, followed by a sudden collapse. Today, global debt is at an all-time high. Central banks around the world have printed trillions, and inflation is rising in many countries, even those considered stable. No, we are not on the brink of Weimar-level hyperinflation, but the lesson is clear. Greater than when trust collapses, money collapses, and when money collapses, societies collapse. 3 clear takeaways. VOstudy.com. Reflective 1. Money is not paper. It is trust. Once trust breaks, no government, no matter how powerful, can force value back into a currency. 2. Economic disasters never happen overnight. They begin quietly. The warning signs often look like growth, stimulus, and prosperity until they don't. 3. History repeats itself when lessons are ignored. From Weimar to Zimbabwe to Venezuela, the pattern is the same. Print too much, borrow too much, trust too little, and collapse becomes inevitable. Closing warning and open-ended final thought. VO Slow, powerful, the world's first massive economic disaster wasn't just a chapter in a history book. It was a message written across a century for every nation that chooses the easy path over the honest one. The question isn't whether another collapse could happen. The question is whether we will recognize the early signs before it does. Natural call to action VO.com. Ending. If you want to understand the hidden forces shaping our financial world and how history's biggest economic disasters still influence Tudama, sure you subscribe, like, and share this video. Because the more we understand our past, the better we can protect our future